Thanks for listening to the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. You can contact the show at twitter.com/DW Groovecast and through Facebook at facebook.com/Drummers Weekly Groovecast.
Good evening.
I am warning you right now, if you touch my drums, I will stab you in the neck with a knife.
Ain't a bucket. Ain't a bucket.
Mom!
Take it easy. Lower it.
I'm not gonna lower it. I have to do this now.
I don't mind you playing it, but lower it.
Everything get straightened out?
Oh, we had a problem. I mean, we tried to do everything we could.
What do you mean?
Well, you know what I mean.
Next.
Little trouble there. You're rushing.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah.
Happy Monday, denizens of Groove-tucky. Phil here from DWG. I trust you're doing well. This week, we're going to bring you our first interview of 2018. I ended up contacting the good folks at Regal Tips Sticks and Brushes up in Niagara Falls back earlier in December of 2017 and told them that I would like to speak to them about how they make sticks, etc., and they were all about it. So we ended up setting up a time back in December, spoke with a gentleman up there by the name of C.W. Dunbar. I'm going to talk about him a little bit more as we get into this show. But it ended up we recorded back before the holidays. I had the best intentions of getting this show out to you prior to that, but I ended up with the death plague of influenza B about a day or so after this show was recorded. Now, that's a whole other story. It also pushed back the drawing for the Aquarian Drumheads, which was in conjunction with the Mike Johnston show back in actual, I guess it was November of 2017. I mean, I could go on and on about that, but make sure you go to the doctor if you get that influenza B. I had that, and let me just say this. I understand how it kills people. But anyway, back on to the show. So I ended up speaking with artist rep C.W. Dunbar up at Regal Tip Sticks and Brushes. And the first short aside that I would like to bring to your attention is that C.W. looks like a young Mike Portnoy. You'll just have to take my word for it because we don't publish the video aspect of these Skype interviews, just the audio. And then the second thing that I think is really cool about it that C.W. and I both share is that he is a metal drummer with a master's degree. So mad props to C.W. Dunbar up at Regal Tip. Now, moving forward, tell you about what we talked about briefly before we get into the show. We talked a good bit about the history of Regal Tip, and we also talked about that in 2018, Regal Tip is going to be celebrating their 60th anniversary, and they've got quite a few things in store for us for this new year, so keep your ear close to the ground for that. We also talked about the manufacturing process of all of their products. For example, when we talk about sticks, we discuss several of the different models that they make, and we talk about everything from how they procure the woods to the dowels, how they're shipped in, how they're dried. We then talk about the lathing process, the different knives that they use to lathe the different models. We get into the lacquering process, and then, of course, we talk about those fantastic Regal Tip tips, the nylon tips that Joe Collado created, how they are made, and then how they are affixed to the stick, which is very interesting. I think that's something that everybody's going to want to hear. We also then talk about Regal Tip brushes, which are absolutely some of their signature products. Virtually every drummer on the face of the planet uses them. Then we also talk about some of their other strikers and mallets. Regal Tip is also known for their creation of the Blastics, some of the great plastic, we'll call them brushes or strikers. We also talk about the grip tie multi-rods, the dowels, and then we also get into the other mallets that they make as well. We then spend a little bit of time talking about the business aspect. We talk about things such as their best sellers. We talk about how many people work at Regal Tip, what it's like to work there, and if there are specific requirements that they're looking for, like woodworking background, business model, business background, etc., that type thing. Then we kind of shift over into the aspect of artists and endorsements, how to get an endorsement, do they have different endorsement levels, how to approach them for an endorsement, etc. Then we kind of morph that into talking about clinic and how they support their artists when they do clinics and or clinic tours. All right. Let's get into the interview, but just before that, I would like to say, if you have not visited our newly revamped website, please do so. You can find us at, shockingly enough, www.drummersweeklygroovecast.com. Please go on over, give us a look, click through all the site, find things that you like, things you don't like. Let us know. We appreciate you guys visiting our site, and any requests, any different things that you would like to see on there, please let us know. All right, let's get into this and talk to C.W. Dunbar, Artist Relations at Regal Tip. Hello, Groovecast Nation. Phil here. We've got another special surprise for you this week. You know that from time to time we like to talk to some of our favorite industry folk. We always talk to you about great topics, and we also bring you interviews with world-class drummers. But now it's time to do another peek inside one of our cornerstone industries, and that's the stick manufacturing industry. And it's my pleasure to have reached out to Regal Tip sticks, brushes, mallets, strikers, etc., etc. And they said, hey, yeah, we'd love to be on the show. We'll tell you everything about us. And so it's my pleasure to welcome to the show today Artist Relations Rep, Mr. C.W. Dunbar. C.W., man, welcome to the show, buddy.
Yeah, thanks.
I thought what we would do first is, before we get into Regal Tip proper, take just a minute or two. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your playing and your musical background, and how you ended up getting to Regal Tip and where you're at right now in artist relations.
Sure. I've been playing for 20 plus years. I have my master's in music performance from UB at Buffalo, and primarily do a lot of metal. I play in about 5 bands locally. I've done a couple U.S. tours and 1 tour in Europe, and I've been working in retail and Guitar Center for the last for about 7 years, and then made the move over here, and with the idea of getting into media and some artist relations, and started out in the shipping department, kind of learning all the inventory and how all the back end works, and then worked my way up into the front office, helping out artists.
Good deal, man. I didn't know it was going to go in this direction. I want to jump back and ask you one quick thing. You said you got your master's degree. Was that in performance or education, or what was it in?
Performance. My undergraduate degree is has like an emphasis in education, even though it's just a straight bachelor's in music. And then the master's is in percussion performance. Good
deal. So I'm going to go ahead and lob this out there to everybody who ends up calling CW trying to get a deal. You better bring it proper, because he's going to ask you to play your 13-stroke rolls, your 15-stroke rolls, your flamadiddles. He's going to hold your feet to the fire. So
that flaw better sounds crisp.
He's into the Swiss rudiments, guys. So, CW, I thought what we would do next is, why don't you tell us just a brief history of Regal Tip, because you guys have been around forever. Regal Tip predates you and I combined together age-wise. So give us a little synopsis.
Yeah. Well, the company is next year. We're celebrating our 60th anniversary. Uh, Started out, making sticks, and eventually got into the nylon tip game. Joe Collado, the owner and proprietor of Regal Tip, he invented the nylon tip and kind of revolutionized the industry with that. And then here, I'm not sure how many years ago, he kind of revolutionized everything with the invention of his E-tip, which is kind of a combination of a nylon and wood tip, sonically anyway. And you get the durability of a nylon tip with the sound of a wood tip. So, but we've been here the longest. We've invented a lot, basically everything that you're going to find out there. Still using constructing everything in-house using all U.S. materials, and it's made top quality.
I think it's absolutely worth reiterating that you guys are in Niagara Falls, just north and west of Buffalo, and it's awesome. We love supporting our American manufacturers. We've done some shows with Gretsch and with Aquarian, and so we give you a big thumbs up, tip of the hat, all that good stuff. So it's so easy, for companies to send stuff overseas and bring it in. It's just great that you guys are doing it in-house up north of Buffalo. So thank you very much.
We do everything here, and we start locally and work our way out that way. So anything we can get locally, we shop as close as we can to us. And then, if it's not available here, we go to the next closest place and so on and so forth.
Well, man, that is the perfect segue, CW, to start talking a little bit about the product. And so let's go ahead and start talking about sticks first.
Sure.
Okay. And so you mentioned that you like to get things as close as possible. In other words, try to stay local when you're in the manufacturing process. Where does the wood, especially like the hickory, come from for making sticks?
Yeah, so the wood actually comes from quite a few different lumber yards, actually in the South. So
Gotcha.
in the Southwest, we're getting in weekly shipments of wood and dowels, and that's where that's coming from.
Gotcha. Once you get those dowels in, is there a specific sort of prep that has to go through with any type of drying, or do they come to you pretty much ready to go?
So they come to us ready to go. We get them in already kiln dried and kind of ready for the stick process.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they were just ready to be made into a stick.
Something I've always wondered is when you guys get these dowels in, and let's say you get a whole shipment in from the Southwest, you're going to make some 2Bs, you're going to make some 7As, you're going to end up making some marching type sticks. Are they all the same diameter dowel, or do you literally use smaller dowels for the 7As, larger dowels for the 2Bs, etc.?
As far as I know, a lot of that stuff when it comes in, it's all similar sized dowels.
Gotcha. So in other words, you guys cut those suckers down a good bit, especially if you're going down to a 7A or so. Got
Yep. And a lot of the sawdust, the results from that, we turn around and use as like mulch. We give out to local places so they can then use it, trying to reuse as much of it as possible, so we're not having to throw away anything.
Awesome. So CW, these dowels, they're in the warehouse. They're ready to be made into drumsticks. Tell us what the process is once you get that dowel ready to make a stick, and then stop just before you get to the lacquer process.
Yeah, so they go through a pretty strict quality control to ensure like optimum moisture control or moisture content and weight. There's quite a few different machines that work on like sanding, cutting it down, getting the tips right, getting the butt ends right, that's basically what takes it up to the lacquering process.
Gotcha. Now, I know from talking to a few folks up there that for every type of stick that you do, whether it be, a traditional stock stick like a 5B or a 2B or whatnot, all the way down to the artist model sticks, you use different, what they call knives. Is that correct to do that?
Yep.
Now, not to give away the farm here or anything like this, it's my understanding that getting one of these knives ready to go, that's quite a process as far as like be able to make that happen. Any idea what it costs to just get a knife ready to make, like an artist stick?
I wish I had that information for you.
Threw you a
I
little
know
curveball, buddy. No big deal.
I know it's decently expensive, from what I've gathered, because I've asked before I was an employee here. I remember asking the same question, and that was the answer that I got. That it's not cheap.
Yeah, it's funny. I did almost the exact same thing. It was several years ago. I had talked to someone up there who was working in artist relations, and I had mentioned something about creating a stick that looked a certain way and felt a certain way. And they're like, "Man, you have no idea what it costs to get a knife and to get it, get everything ready just to make one stick, and how many, dozens of how many bricks of those they have to sell just to even recoup the cost of the knife." So.
And then just the idea of, for all the different cuts, there's all the setting up of the machines to make sure that they're ready for when all goes through, that they can be cut and there's no holdups. And so there's a lot of extra time that even goes into setting up different cuts.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, let's talk about the infamous Regal tip lacquer, because it's the lacquer. That's one of the hallmarks of Regal tip sticks. If you like that stuff, there's nothing else that will do other than a Regal tip stick, because it feels so good in your hand once they get warmed up a little bit. Tell us a little bit about, now you got the stick, you got it cut down. How does the lacquer process work?
So it's one of our kind of trade secrets, but it's our own proprietary lacquering process. As the saying goes, often imitated, never duplicated. But it is the reason that I play Regal tip.
Yeah.
And it was the reason that drew me to Regal tip is I play a lot of extreme metal, and so anything that helps the grip is extremely important. And once I started playing some Regal tips, it was like a revolution. Just the grip, and like you said, as you start using it, the lacquer actually kind of warms up a little bit, it softens a bit, and is able just to kind of stick in your hand without the need of dipping it in rubber or using any external things like stick wax or any of that kind of stuff. It's an all-in-one thing. And I know a lot of times people, they see the sheen from the lacquer and it makes it look slick, but it's the exact opposite. It's pretty tacky, but in a very natural.
Oh, I completely agree. I'm a huge fan of the lacquer on those sticks. So now, not to give away then the trade secrets, but there is something that I think it's always interesting. I think some people realize what this is. Some people still love the mystique of this, but in the lacquered sticks, when you look at the butt end, there's a little tiny black dot that's in there, and there's all the conspiracy theories of guys go, "Man, that's a counterweight that they put in there. It's some kind of a counterweight." But we know that's not the actual fact for that. Would you mind telling everybody what that little, or not rubber, but little plastic black dot is in the end of the stick?
I can't give away everything, but I do know that the little black dot does, it makes you play faster. And that's just there.
That's funny, man. Okay, now we talked just a second ago about Joe Collado and the inventor of the nylon tip. How do the tips get affixed onto the sticks to where they stay on permanently? Because that's one of the huge secrets. You want to make sure that tip not only is durable to where the thing doesn't crack and break off, but it also needs to stay on there, because everybody knows that if you got a bad nylon tip stick, if that nylon tip goes flying off, it's pit central on your drum heads. So how are those things put on?
So as far as I can't give away everything to how the process goes, but it is, it's, to take a step back, the nylon tip itself, it's a 100% extruded nylon tip, as in it's made from one solid piece of nylon. So there's no seam on it.
Gotcha.
And it's also the only tip that is 100% nylon. So you get the really nice, bright, crisp, classic tone that you'll hear on the old jazz recordings from those tips. And they don't use, when they're put onto the sticks, there's no glue or anything like that's used. And you could almost say it's kind of a wedging process, which is sort of a way to describe it. But once it's affixed onto the stick, it's not going anywhere.
I can absolutely vouch for that. I don't play a lot of nylon tip sticks, but I in particular use some of the E series from time to time, which I think it's absolutely worth taking just a moment or two and talking about the E series, because folks who have not played those and experienced what those things actually sound like on cymbals are missing out, because in particular, companies come out with new things all the time, and people think, oh, well, this is just some sort of a gimmick. And let me tell you, I was a little bit skeptical also when I first saw these. But let me tell you, the proof is in the pudding, man. Those things sound fantastic. So, Charles, tell everybody what these E-Series tips look like, because, like I said, that in itself, sometimes, if you can describe that thing, that will maybe help everybody understand a little bit more what we're looking at.
So if you picture the things on any of the classic Maureen cereal commercials where they have the weird slitted dowel that they always dip in and out of the honey, that's kind of the tips of these look like. You take a solid nylon tip and you cut out horizontal cuts basically out of the tip, and it gives it, maybe you take about 40% of the mass of the tip out of the tip. It might be a little less. I'm not 100% sure. But what it does is you still have the durability of the 100% nylon, but because there isn't as much mass there, you get a warmer tone akin to a wood tip. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. With the E-Series tips, you're not going to have to worry about your tips, like a wood tip, one of the sides shaving off, because that's the way the grain cuts. With this, it's going to be solid and it's going to stay right there with you, but it's also a much laid back sort of nylon sound. So it's got warmer tone to it. It's not near as bright. It's a nice warm tone.
CW, how much in this process that we've talked about, whether it be, a wood tip stick or a nylon tip stick, how much of it is automated and how much of it is actual human hands-on with the machines?
It is, it's really hands everywhere. Anytime a machine is doing something with sticks, there's a person there running the machine, adjusting the machine, manipulating it, moving the sticks in and out of it. It's a very hands-on, machine-driven, but man-controlled, hands-on process. It's not when you watch like a show, something like How It's Made, where it's going through, like a factory and you don't see a single person there. If you were going to be How It's Made back in our factory, there's going to be people everywhere.
That's awesome to hear, man, because when we were down at Gretsch, Gretsch, of course, being one of the great American manufacturers, you don't really know what it's going to be like till you get in there. And then it's almost the exact same way. There are machines everywhere, but there is a person with hands on the drum at every aspect. So that's awesome. Great to hear that.
Yeah, the machines are there just to facilitate a consistent and quickened process, but it's all ran by a person, so you still get a human element in every aspect.
Gotcha. I want to spend just a minute or two and talk about like the research and development aspect of sticks, and also how you come about, because it kind of goes hand in hand when you make a new stick for an artist. What kind of process do you go through? Are we talking about drawing out blueprints? Are we talking about guys bringing in sticks and going, hey, I want you to make this sort of like this, but make a little bit of a shorter taper, or I want an acorn tip, or kind of how does that work on anytime you're working on a new stick?
A lot of that stuff, we go through a real consistent sort of R&D process. A lot of communication, especially like when an artist approaches us. We take it with a very serious, open-minded approach, and really look at, how can a new stick, how can it affect the market? Is it something that someone else is doing? Can we do it better than they are? A lot of stuff like that. And we try to work, we're actually working with one of our featured artists right now on something that we don't have in our line right now. And we're going to be, the plan is to be showcasing it at NAMM. I can't talk too much more about it. But it started out as he had a prototype. He sent it to us and he's like, hey, this is something I'd like to do. So we started looking at it. We got in touch with one of the other many companies that we're affiliated with and we have relations with, and got them on board helping us out to really bring this creation to life. So, tremendous. But Yeah, and it's an involvement all the way from the top too.
Awesome. One last thing about the sticks, and then I want to move into some brushes.
Yeah, yeah.
Of everything that we've talked about through this entire process of making a stick, is there one in particular issue that is the biggest obstacle to getting consistent sticks?
I think what it ends up coming down to is, with any amount of moisture content, what you can have if a stick sits long enough is it can warp. And sometimes, as you have sticks sitting, waiting to go through, you can end up going through them. Maybe they go through the lacquering process, and they get to the final stages, and you start rolling out sticks, and you have wobbles and you have warps. And I think that's where that can be kind of the make or break point. Is the moisture content is very one of those issues or elements that's kind of out of your control, and we really try to do our best to keep it consistent. But sometimes you don't find out until you're all the way at the end of the process, and you have some sticks that just can't go out.
When that happens, what do you guys do with those sticks?
A lot of that we keep around, and like I've taken some seconds myself just to have some extra sticks to play. I teach lessons, so sometimes if a kid's needing some sticks, I can bring those. We also will donate those out as firewood. A lot of the unlacquered make great kindling.
And man, that's tremendous. I would have never thought that would have been the case, but absolutely, I understand that.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on and talk about the brushes. The different models of brushes that you guys make up there have made appearances on our show numerous times and times again. We talk about they are the industry standard of industry standards. I think it's pretty well known that guys that have stick endorsements with other stick makers actually use Regal tip brushes a lot of times, even when they're using different manufacturers' sticks. So that will give you a little bit of a testament to the quality and the feel of Regal tip brushes. So I wanted to ask you this. I know that you like to get things in the U.S., get materials from the U.S. Are all of the different parts of the brushes, whether it be the rubber handles, the pull rods, the wires themselves, the metal body of the brush, how much of that stuff is made in-house, or are most of those parts brought in from outside, and then the sticks or the brushes are mainly assembled there?
It's all of the materials are I said 100% US made, and as far as what comes in here, it's a pretty good mix of like in-house made plus assembling parts that come in. So like we get our gum rubber, we get that from a local guy here in town actually, and that's like the stuff that goes onto the handles for our classic brush. We get from here in town. So it all comes in, and like I was saying earlier, we try to pull as much of that stuff locally. A lot of our brass comes locally. Anything that we need to get like annealed, we get that locally. I picked up a machined part the other day from a local guy on the way to work. So we all keep it here in town as much as we can, and then it's all assembled right here, right by our guys in our back production room.
Awesome. Can you tell us the basic process of assembly for, let's just say, the traditional 583R brush or any of those retractable brushes?
I can't talk too much about it, only because I haven't had to assemble any myself. But from what I've gathered, being around it enough, you know what? A lot of it goes down to taking the brushes themselves, put them together, getting them into the handles, crimping the handles closed so that it holds the brushes in the fanned out shape, and then applying. You know, we assemble all the packaging here too, and then getting it out that way. I know as far as that goes, you know, those brushes, they all use like thick-walled aluminum tubes and brass internals with tin-coated wires, and that's all U.S. made as well.
Gotcha. Now, another thing that Regal Tip has been incredibly famous for and has popularized are the plastic brushes as well. I know that I bought my first pair of Blastics Gosh, man, it was back. I still have them, man, from back in the 80s. I mean,
That's incredible.
I mean, it's incredible. Tell us a little bit about the Blastics, how those things are made, because those are 100% completely plastic, except for, I suppose, like the little rubber O-rings that are around the outside of them.
Right. Yeah, those guys. It's actually a material called polypropylene, is what we use for our the bristles themselves. And as far as those go, again, I'm not as familiar with the actual construction process of those guys, but those are also just made right in the back. They're all assembled back there. And one thing that kind of sets a lot of our products, like our Blastics, our brushes, apart is we use very high quality materials. So you might find our stuff's a little more expensive, but it's because, like you said, you're buying a Blastic that's going to last you 30 years.
And I mean, again, I am absolute living proof of that. I mean, I've got old Blastics that I believe they were probably purchased in like 1988, somewhere in that part. It was before they started putting the little O-rings on there, and I still use them, man. I still use those old Blastics. One
of our jazz guys got a hold of me looking to get an order of some brushes and some drumsticks, and he was kind of restocking himself. But the last time he had made a purchase or an order was back in 2010. That was 7 years ago that he bought his last bundle of brushes, and this dude's playing all the time, and it's been 7 years since he needed to replace them. I
believe it. Totally believe it. CW, while we're on the topic of other strikers, and we just finished up with these Blastics, I want to take a second and talk about kind of the next logical extension of those. And that is the multi-rods, and you guys call those the grip tie sticks. Right. Now, for those who are not aware of what those things are, they're just a whole bunch of little tiny dowels that are put together. Yep. Are those things glued together in the handles? How are those things constructed compared to, say, like the Blastics, which are plastic?
Yeah, I believe with the dowels, I believe there's a little bit of glue on the inside to help hold them together. They have the handles that we have on those. I believe it's polypropylene handles, which it feels like rubber, but it's not actually rubber. I'd have to double check that. But that goes up a decent amount of the base, which also helps hold it together. And those are on there pretty tight. And then they also have rings at the top of it, rubber gasket rings that help kind of keep the top together. But yeah, I think there is a little bit of glue within there too.
Yeah, I one of the things that I really like about the grip ties is that polypropylene handle. I mean, those things feel so good in your hands compared to just the bare dowels that some other manufacturers make. So,
I agree.
If it adds to the structural integrity, it's just a bonus. So,
yep, exactly.
Now, I would like to also talk a little bit about a couple of other kind of specialty strikers, and if you could describe them to the listeners and talk a little bit about their construction as well. Tell everybody about the Cajon brush.
Sure. So the Cajon brush is you take like your normal something like a Blastic, and you just make it 2 to 3 times as thick. So it's maybe 3/4 of an inch in diameter. And we have both just the straight bristles, and then we also have what we call the wave, and that one is they're curved or ribbed bristles, and those guys are really nice for playing on the surface of a cajon. So if you can look up a lot of videos of guys using cajon brushes, and you can treat your cajon more, instead of a hand drum, you can treat it like a conventional drum that you would play like with a stick, and you can then use them for like just like you would with brushes on a snare drum. You can drag them on the surface of the cajon. You can play either traditional or like a match grip on there, and it just allows you to then turn that into a normally like stricken sort of drum.
Well, one of the things in particular about the thickness of that cajon brush is it does a very good job to get like that bass tone out of the cajon. That's one of the things that I really like about that brush in particular.
Yep, the size of it does lend itself to creating or bringing out a lot of the lower fundamentals out of the drum. If it was too thin, then you would just get kind of a higher tinny sort of sound out of the cajon itself.
The next thing I want to talk about might be the most interesting and maybe the most different product that you guys make. Talk to us about the conga stick.
The conga stick's one of my favorite. It's really great. It's you take a wooden like a stick thickness dowel, and then you take a sort of like a leather glove basically, and you put it to the end of it. So it's the idea of being able to get a sound that sounds like you're playing a conga with a hand, but it's a stick. It allows you to get like a hand tone, slap quality of like a hand, but without having to tear up your actual hands. Right now we're building a sound studio so we can start doing our own in-house product reviews. There are a few videos, and sad to say they're not ours, but we're working on that. But there are a few videos on YouTube that you can find of people using not the slapstick, geez, the conga stick, and it's awesome. How much it sounds like a set of hands is pretty incredible.
Those things actually sound good on cajones as well, So yeah, so there's a couple of different uses, man, for that conga stick. But yeah, it is absolutely one of the most different offerings that anybody puts out. So
yeah. And it's extremely well together too. They are built solid. You look at them; they're not only are they affixed to the stick itself, but they're also tightened on and secured with thread too. But yeah, they're built like tanks.
Tell us about the handbarine.
So the handbarine is really interesting. It's you take a really thick stick and you carve out some holes so you can include in like some tambourine-like jingles, and it allows you to be able to get a tambourine sound out of a stick without having to hold a tambourine. You can still play on the drums with it too, to a degree, but it allows you to not have to actually have a tambourine mounted on the kit, or to take up one of your hands with a tambourine that you can't do anything else with.
Gotcha. I want to now shift gears and move over to the mallet section of the catalog.
Yeah.
And I want to first talk about the Saul Goodman timpani sticks, because one of the things that virtually every timpanist is going to be super critical of are the striking heads, whether they're felt and or wood. So let's talk a little about where do you guys get the felt? How are these things procured? And then how are the Goodman timpani sticks then constructed?
The felt itself, I believe, is procured locally. We get in the sewn tips locally and then apply them onto the tips of the sticks we make here. We grind them out of the dowels, and then we attach those felt tips. And the nice thing is we say one of your felts came loose, it's worn out. We sell just the tips here as well to replace them. So if something happens and your felt came off, you can get a new one. You don't have to buy a whole new mallet. You can just get that, which is really great. And Saul Goodman and Joe Collado, they were friends from the get-go, and they collaborated together to bring Saul's vision for timpani mallets to the mainstream.
Gotcha. Now, CW, I want to shift gears again just a little bit and just do some general questions, because a lot of times our listeners in particular find these incredibly fascinating. Roughly how many folks work inside of Regal Tip?
We have we run about 2 shifts of 20 to 25 people. So it's a decent sized crew here.
Got you. So when you say 2 shifts, are you running like what we'd call like a traditional first and second shift where people work, in the morning up until the afternoon, and then people work from the afternoon until the evening?
Yep, similar to that, yeah.
Man, you guys are busy.
Yeah, we have a lot of orders. Not only do we do a lot of U.S. orders, but we have quite a few international companies ranging from Japan, Korea, South Africa, Russia. I mean, we're sending our sticks all over the globe.
Gotcha. A lot of people want to know, how do you end up getting a gig at Regal Tip. So what are some of the things you guys look for, whether it be people who work in making sticks or people who work like in your position for artist rep?
Sure. Education is pretty important. Whether, like for me, having a master's in performance really lends itself to being able to talk to people that play. But also, as far as having like woodworking experience or machining experience does help, but it's not required because there's also in-house training for people looking to get into the job. And we're always taking applications too. It's a pretty close-knit family environment in here, even with a lot of people. So everybody's treated pretty specially, I'd say.
Nice, man. Very nice. Now, just a couple of quick questions about some of the products also.
Yeah.
And you don't have to give numbers or anything with this. Don't want to give away the family Collado secrets up there. But I want to ask you about sticks and brushes and strikers as far as, like, for example, in drumsticks. Is there a particular model or two that you're just like, man, these things fly off the shelves. We cannot keep them in stock. These are the most popular sticks we make.
So the classic brush, which is it's the 583 is its number, is the number one selling brush in the world, and we can't keep it stocked fast enough. We'll get new stock in, and then it's almost, even if it's 500, it's already allocated to an order. As far as sticks go, the E series is actually very popular, and that's picking up steam. But the 5BX and the 5AX are super popular. We're constantly trying to keep up with our supply on those extended length sticks.
Well, yeah, I want to say one quick thing about the 5BX and 5AX. The other thing that I think that is so appealing about those sticks is both of those have a relatively short taper to that acorn tip, which is, for a lot of people, that's a magic combination. And
oh yeah,
let me tell you, for the better part of 15 years, those two sticks have what I've been primarily using. They are tremendous models, so I get it.
Yeah, I see that quite a bit on endorsement applications. Is that sort of thing. Another two sets of sticks that are very popular that are really unique to Regal Tip are the 8As and the 9As. If you've never played a 9A, you owe it to yourself to go out and get a set, because they feel tremendous. They have a barrel tip, a shorter taper, and they are a really nice weighted balance stick.
Gotcha. Are there any other like specialty strikers or anything that's kind of like one of the main things that gets purchased, maybe like the blast sticks or?
Other than like the 583s, the classic brush, everything else is pretty even across the board as far as like what goes out. The yellow jacket brush, which is just a less expensive version of the classic brush, is also very popular too. The main difference there between it and the classic is using, instead of gum rubber handles, it's using polypropylene, so it's a little bit cheaper material. So it's no, you're not sacrificing quality. You're just using materials that just aren't as expensive, make it a little more approachable for normal people.
Gotcha. Now let's shift this conversation right into your wheelhouse right now. Let's talk about artists and endorsements, because everybody that listens to this show, they are always like, well, it'd be great to have some kind of a deal with somebody. What do I need to do to get it? What are they looking for? What do I need to expect? That sort of thing. So the first thing I want to ask you is pretty much softball. What is Regal Tip looking for in someone who approaches them for an endorsement?
Sure. Well, the landscape of endorsements has changed a lot, especially recently with the advent of social media and everything. It used to be expected, like, if you're an artist, you're going for an endorsement so that you can get free stuff, essentially. I mean, that's what I always thought growing up. I was like, I want to get with some people so I can be cool on the website and get some free gear. Well, it's becoming more of a two-way street. So if you want to be with a company, you're now also expected to rep the brand and be out there, be seen with it, posting pictures of yourself using the gear. And that's what we're looking for, is someone who's willing to also put in effort on their end as well to help promote the brand. We'll promote the artist, but we also need help from the artist to promote the brand. And having a good presence as far as social media goes helps, but also just having fans being out there playing, being on tour, being on the road, or also like conversely having like maybe a large student contingent doing clinics, being very active in like the educational sort of side of things. So we're just looking for people that are really out there presenting a good positive image, and who kind of are ready to put in the work with a very family oriented company.
How does someone approach you? Do they just give you a call? Is there a form to fill
Yep.
out?
We're working right now on getting like some more literature on our actual website for that, but you can call the office. I don't have the number, but that can be right on our website. You can call the office. You can ask for me, and we can talk. You can send me an email. My email is charles@directmusic.supply.com. We also have a distributor here, and so that's where my email comes from. But and you can just shoot me an email, charles@directmusicsupply.com, and you can ask about endorsements. We can talk about that, and we can kind of go from there. But we are looking for people, and we are getting, especially recently, we've been getting a lot of hits, so we're pretty busy in that respect.
Well, for folks who didn't get that, I will make sure to put not only Regal Tips web address in the show notes, I'll make sure to put Charles's contact information in there as well.
Yeah, that's much appreciated.
Sure. Now, let's talk about endorsers and endorsement levels also, because again, it kind of goes back to what you're talking about, that as a kid, you might have seen Alex Van Halen playing Regal Tip sticks, but then you see someone else who's more of a local or regional player that plays Regal Tip sticks and might have a small presence on a website. There are different levels of endorsements because, it's a very different thing to put someone from the stature of Alex Van Halen. So if you would, why don't you tell everyone just briefly kind of what that means?
Sure. So you don't have to be like in a world renowned touring band only to get in here. Even if you have a large impact in your community, maybe you're a very well renowned teacher, maybe you're a very influential player in your community, or educator. That also is as equally important to us. And it's as far as the levels go, we don't have levels or like tiers as much as like some other companies do. We kind of work on it or look at it on a person to person basis on what will best fit them.
Gotcha. Does Regal Tip support any clinics?
That's another thing that's changing in the landscape, especially with the advent of, like online streaming and stuff like that. But we are supporting clinics, but that's changing from a way where you're just going to pay someone to go out there and do clinics. I know a lot of places when they are hosting a clinic, they're really just supplying they're supplying like the venue, but they're also not necessarily paying for clinics. So it's changing, but we do still support it. Absolutely.
I think one thing that's interesting to mention is that we had John DeChristopher on the show several months ago, and he talked about kind of the sticky situation of companies supporting clinicians. And he made a very, very salient point where he basically said, look, if Zildjian, Gretsch, Remo, and like Regal Tip were all supporting a clinician, it's very unfair for someone like Regal Tip or Remo to do an even split from the standpoint of making an even payment to an endorser, simply from the standpoint that you guys have to sell, how many tens of dozens of sticks to get that back, whereas opposed a couple of cymbals could potentially be purchased from Zildjian. And so I think that's another interesting thing, that if you don't see certain companies that sell smaller ticketed items, if you don't see them necessarily plastered all over a clinic, that doesn't mean that they're still not involved.
Yep, exactly. No, and that's it too. And sometimes it may be, depending on the company, it may not be where you're paying the clinician, but where you're providing them with all of the materials they need, T-shirts, maybe banners, like in our case, providing them with sticks. those kinds of things. So maybe you're not being able to pay them, but they're not having to buy any of those kinds of materials. That's all being, and then like the extra things like T-shirts, wristbands, banners, stuff like that's being provided.
Now, to make another quick shift and go in a direction, I want to talk a little bit about technology, because we've already talked a little bit about how you look for endorsers and how endorsers find you through social media, through your website, that sort of stuff. I think it's very interesting to relate to the listeners just from a standpoint of either social media or your website. What kind of business traffic do you guys get now? In other words, like people who are buying things. How is that different from even, say, 10 years ago? Now, I know you haven't been there 10 years, but I'm sure that there's people there that relate to it and just go, wow, this is a completely new paradigm.
Yeah, it's the, advertising has changed a lot, especially with things like where magazines aren't as popular as they used to be. So, that's changing quite a bit due to technology. And then like even the selling of sticks, where it used to be you would have to rely on any of your local stores to sell. And now people are bypassing the local stores completely and just going and ordering your stuff online. So now it's becoming really tricky to make sure that your products can get out there and get to everybody when the main places you're supplying to, people aren't even going to. And so we still try to stock all of the local stores around where you are, but we also have worked out a partnership with a website called 716 Percussion, where they carry our entire line. So if you can't find it locally, just go to 716 Percussion, and they carry everything that we have there. And so if you can't get it, we can get it to you.
CW, along that same line, something that used to be incredibly vital, and this was back in the day, that day being 15 to 20 years ago, was the traveling store rep. In other words, someone who reps several different lines of gear, and they would go visit their retailers and check in on them and make sure if they needed to make orders, apprise them of new products and stuff. Is that even done any longer? And if it's not, is it just because you guys can do it so effectively through technology?
That type of idea is going by the wayside. Through my time at Guitar Center, we used to get reps coming in all the time from like the various companies. And as the years went on, that happened less and less, to where you might see one rep throughout the year. And like I always worked in the drum department, and there was only one consistent rep that would come in, and that was for Bose. But otherwise, you didn't get any of the other companies. So I think that might be a thing that's kind of going by the wayside now that you can reach out to people, through the internet, and you don't have to pay for someone to be out on the road 7 days a week.
Well, in that same vein, do you see that happening with NAMM and say like PASIC and other trade shows where different companies have displays? Is that slowly fading out, or do you think that's still something that's got to be there?
I think that's still something that has to be there, because those kinds of shows, along just with the hype of, you're getting there, it's the whole atmosphere. You're around, celebrities, you're around like the top people. Like you might meet someone from the Zildjian family there. It's the idea of being able to because music is a tactile field, and being able to get instruments in your hands, right in front of your face. You can see it, you can feel it. And that's never going to go away. And that's one of the things that makes it really tough ever doing anything online and trying to trust on the internet, is you take away that personability of music. That's why we always really stress of supporting your local stores before, going and ordering stuff, is those people, they're there, they have experience, and they're there to help you. And it gets you a chance to really see the product and feel it and get to know it too.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. CW, we are about to power down here, but before we do, I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to talk about either A, anything else that you would like to talk about, whether it be any kind of products or anything that is exciting that's going on at Regal Tip, and then B, is there anything else that you just want to promote regarding Regal Tip?
Yeah. Right now, we have, like I said, we're working with one of our featured artists on a pretty cool stick idea coming up at NAMM. But we also have another stick that we're working with a different featured artist. His name's Treyway, and we're going to be repping his brand new 5AX at NAMM. Those are some slick looking sticks for a really great guy. And like I said, they've been out for a bit. We are really going to be showcasing them at NAMM. And other than that, I've been a huge fan of Regal Tip for like the last 6 years that I've been using their sticks. And along with the sticks, the people here are also very incredible. And so if ever there's going to be a company that you're looking to get behind to start supporting, Regal Tip is that company. We have tons of great products. Everything we make is of the highest quality. And you're not going to be disappointed.
And again, to reiterate, made in the USA.
Absolutely, 100%. The only thing that isn't are our T-shirts and stick bags.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you could actually take, you're very close to being in Canada. You could just about throw a brick of sticks and get across the border, but.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Well, CW, thank you so much, man, for agreeing to be on the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting us. This was a great opportunity.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned before to our listeners, if you missed anything that he said regarding being able to get in contact with him or get in contact with Regal Tip, it's going to be in the show notes. So just make sure that when you download the show, look in those show notes. You'll be able to see some clickable links that will take you to Regal Tip, and you'll be able to email CW directly. CW, thank you so much, man. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right. Big thanks to C.W. Dunbar, Artist Relations Rep at Regal Tip, and all the other good folks up there at Niagara Falls. Thanks so much for agreeing to be on the show. For our listeners, if you haven't been by Regal Tip's website, do yourself a solid. Go by regaltip.com. And by the way, that will be linked in the show notes along with CW's email address if you'd like to get in touch with him. Check out the website. One of the best websites for sticks out there. You can do all kinds of cool things aside from the normal things like checking out the artist roster and products, etc. You can go to their stick specs page and you can just find everything you would possibly want to know about the sticks that they have available, such as diameter and length, bead type, lacquer, no lacquer, etc. The tapers. It really is very useful when you're trying to find a stick that you like to play. All right, moving forward with a little DWG business. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, make sure you go by our new website. That's correct. We're still keeping our Facebook and our Twitter and all of our other social media, but we have a proper website now that we want you to go check out. We are at www.drummersweeklygroovecast.com. I know, it's surprising, isn't it? We actually got a .com. You don't have to send those crazy memes over. It says, sorry, you have a .net. It's drummersweeklygroovecast.com. Go over, check it out. You can, of course, access the show there. You can always get in touch with us there as well. And you can also check out all of our videos. We are posting our host spotlight videos there as well as Accountability Thursday videos. Basically, our website, we're trying to get everything consolidated where you can pretty much access any media and any form of contact regarding the show all in one convenient location for you. Yes, that's correct. All right. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, pretty much anywhere that you access and listen to your favorite podcasts, you can find us. If you can't find us, make sure you let us know. You can always reach out to us through our website, or you can email us at our traditional email address, which is drummersweeklygroovecast@gmail.com. You can also still reach out to us through our traditional forms of social media, such as our Facebook page. We're at facebook.com/drummersweeklygroovecast. We're also on Twitter. You can tweet to us. We are at DWGroovecast. Or if you are OG, twitter.com/DWGroovecast. Now, we don't normally ask for favors, but here's a small one. The next time you're in iTunes and you're just thumbing through listening to shows and listening to your favorite music, swing by the Drummers Weekly Groovecast homepage inside of iTunes and leave us a short written review. we would greatly appreciate it, because what it does is it allows other listeners to drumming podcasts and music podcasts of the same ilk. It allows us to relate a little bit higher in the list, so when people are looking for new shows, they can find us, and then they can be a part of Groovecast Nation, and we don't have to talk behind their back, etc., and so on and so on. All right, one last thing before we go. I thought it would be kind of cool to use some joiner music going into and out of the interview with CW from some Regal Tip artists. What we heard going into the show was Jeff Hamilton playing a brush solo, and what we're listening to underneath my inane ramblings is the great Tom Breckline, friend of the show. He's playing on a Brandon Fields tune entitled You Got It. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week. We will see you next Monday with a brand new episode. Bye-bye.